Hello and welcome to my introduction to Blender tutorial. If you're new to 3D modeling and Blender, this video is for you. If you're not new to modeling but you are new to Blender, this video is also for you. I just want to basically go over quickly the various aspects of the Blender interface. The better you understand the interface, the much easier it is to start creating some pretty cool stuff. So let's get started here. When you install and run Blender and run it for the first time, it looks pretty much like the scene right here. It's called the default view. Actually have it set to a different view. There we go. There's the default Blender view. And the layout is basically as such. You have this menu bar across the top, which is the information window. And you have this area right here, including this menu, which I want to hide right now because that menu is part of this 3D viewport, which is this menu here, and this window is this 3D viewport. This menu does have its own window, but it's hidden up here. This window here is the timeline, and here's its menu. And over here we have the outliner, which is basically a breakdown of everything in your scene. And this is a properties window, and the properties window will change. You'll notice these buttons up here change when you select different objects. And this icon in particular, the object data button, will change each time you select a different object. And that's very important to understand, that when you select an object, the properties of that object will be displayed here. You won't really use the scene menu much. And the information bar, you'll not generally play with the views much. There's a bunch of built-in views, plus you can create your own views. You'll generally work in the default view. And later on, when you become better and you're generating more complex stuff, you'll need multiple scenes, and you'll control that here. This button basically shows the two modes that Blender can be in the render mode or the game mode. You'll primarily be in the render mode. And then over here, this button forces whatever menu to full screen. We don't want to do that right now. But what I want to show you is if you come down here and click down here, you get the same menu that you get up here. And you can choose to, let's make this an info window, just like this. You'll see these are both identical menus now. And if we click down here, change this to an info window, now we have 3 info windows. And if you click down here and make this an info window, you'll see this has the same menu that this has. We could even pull this out a little bit here, and we could do the same thing with the last one. So, and if that's not enough, in the corner of these windows here you see little triangles. You can drag a triangle and drag out another window, which is also right now defaulting to the info window. But you could make it whatever you want it to be. And that's the point behind setting all these this way. You can lay out the windows any way you want, and then you save them under your own view. But for the most part, most people use this layout. It's pretty generic, and it also makes it easier when you're watching videos. Most people use the default layout, so if you're using the default layout, you see somebody go for a button, you'll know roughly where it's at. So to recap, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major windows: the information window, the 3D viewport, the timeline, the outliner, and the properties windows. In the 3D viewport, you'll notice that right here you have several different modes that you can be in. Primarily, you're going to be working in the object mode or edit mode, and it's very important to understand these two modes and the difference between them, because there's not much visible difference between the modes, and you get lost sometimes in your head. You're trying to do something, and you need to be in the other mode to do that. So basically, your best rule of thumb is to understand that if you're adding objects to a scene, you're going to want to be in object mode. And if you're moving objects around in a scene, you're going to want to be in object mode. Because object mode, think of object mode for objects, edit mode for editing objects. Now let's go back into object mode, and a quick shortcut between object and edit mode is to hit tab. And so from object mode, I'm going to hit D, Shift D to duplicate, and we'll duplicate on the Y-axis and create a couple of extra cubes here. So now you'll see we have three separate entities, and by right-clicking any one of them, that becomes the active or selected object. And then hitting tab will take you into edit mode, where you can go in and edit the individual vertices of that object. Now, if you want to move an object, for example, let's say you want to move this object forward, you want to be in object mode to move the object. Now, if you're in edit mode, let's say your active object is this center cube, and you select all of the vertices so that you can move the object. If you move this object forward, if you're in edit mode and you select all of the vertices and you move the object forward, it moves, but the center point of the object, which is right there, that little circle, stays. So if you tab back into object mode, the center point is now outside the cube here, whereas inside it's here. As long as you're in object mode, the center point will move with the object. When you're in edit mode, the center point stays and the object moves, so you're offsetting from it. And this comes into play when you're considering your rotations. If let's say I rotate around the y-axis here, you'll see that the box spins around the y-axis there. However, if I do the same thing here, it's going to spin around the y-axis still. It's just different because it's offset from the center. So be careful. When moving objects, you generally want to be in object mode to move an object, unless you're intentionally offsetting from the center for animation reasons and whatnot, to move the registration point for rotation. For example, let's say you're making a pendulum or something. So let's turn this object into the part of a pendulum here. Let's scale it on the y-axis here and scale it on the x. And so there's our pendulum. However, if we rotate it, the top part is moving back and forth. We want our rotation point to be right here at the top. So we'll tab into edit mode, and with all of the vertices selected, we'll grab it on the z-axis and move it down. So now, when we're back into object mode, when we go to test it, it'll swing more like a pendulum. So you get the idea there. Good enough. Okay, so to recap this here, you have object mode for adding or moving objects, and you have edit mode for editing individual vertices of that object, or changing the offset from the object center. And that object center that's the real definition of the object. So that's about it for the introduction phase. Again, we covered the various menu types, or the basic ones. There's other ones that we haven't gotten into yet, but you will later on down the road. And the basic modes, operational modes of Blender, the object mode and the edit mode. So take that forward with the other tutorials, and you should do pretty well. I hope this was helpful. Comments are welcome anytime. Thanks.